Hello and welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast, even when it's about colony in space, in which I, Toby Haydock, watch a Doctor Who story, sometimes colony in space, and try to choose my favourite things about it.
Hi Toby, my name is Simon Curtis. As I record this, I'm producing on Doctors, a daytime drama that's made in Birmingham, and the story I have for you to watch is from Season 8 and is Colony in Space.
Once more unto the clay, once more. It's our final visit to the planet of Exarius. And it's the last trip to the colony in space. So let's see how they get on. This, I wouldn't say much, is it much maligned or is it oft shrugged off Pertwee story, but certainly one that the received wisdom was always, it was a bit of a disappointment, certainly the low point in Barry Letts's first full season as producer, and a disappointment considering it was the third Doctor's first visit to outer space, which was expected to bring with it some Raz and indeed Mataz, whereas in fact it's largely got clay and indeed dungarees and mush and indeed starches. But often such received wisdom can then see a sea change as the years go by, but I don't think Colony in Space has ever quite recovered from its reputation. So let's see how it fares as we sum it up with the final observations from the generally positive denizens of Patronville. I think those who've got nothing nice to say about a particular story tend not to, because that's the kind of tenor that one tries to encourage within the confines of this podcast, at least, because even though I find it very easy and enjoyable to get annoyed with bits of Doctor Who that I don't like, I for various reasons that I've outlined before, try to at least shine a bit of positivity out there in A, Doctor Who discourse, and B, the internet, because I think we live in a dark and dreary world. And that said, dreary is certainly a not unfair criticism that has been levelled at Colony in Space, even though I've been thoroughly enjoying it. But let's see what people have to say. John Hall, regular communicator, John, sometimes publicly and sometimes by private message. Always good to hear from him. John says, by the time the Claws of Axos aired, viewers must have been saying, "Oh Christ, not the Master again," and rolling their eyes. But by the time he turns up in Colony, just when things have gotten rather repetitive, viewers at home must have been exclaiming, "Thanks Christ's the Master's finally showed up. Maybe now something will actually happen," with a wink emoji with the tongue sticking out. So that's quite a lascivious wink. John being extra cheeky there in the medium of emojis. John also says, is it just me, or is that the slowest executed finger jab in the history of television? Well, I don't know how many finger jabs there are in the history of television, but it is certainly one that takes its time, John, yes. Shane Plays says, Delgado is 110% my favourite Master. Absolutely perfect for the role. Charismatic, evil, smooth, and just slightly, oh, ever just the right amount of slightly camp. Perfection in black clothing. Is he camp? I'm not a very good reader of camp. Toby, John Hall is back again. The idea of Winton being played by Prentice Hancock scarcely bears thinking about. That was something I suggested a few episodes earlier. And he's done a monkey with it's the Hear No Evil monkey emoji. Didn't even know there was one of those. Don't worry, I'll stop banging on now so I don't monopolise the comments section as well. Do what you like, John. Frank Shales pops in. Frank's also a regular contributor. Delgado pitches his performances perfectly to remain a cosmic evil, but not absolutely traumatise the younger children watching. No wonder he was cheered, not booed, when the Demon's location shooting. It's similar to the Daleks. Terence Dix said that kids enjoyed their utter ruthlessness, liking the idea of giving teacher a quick exterminating blast, and I certainly would have liked my evil chemistry teacher to be reduced to a doll-sized figure in a sandwich box with hard-boiled eggs. It's that curious thing that Doctor Who has, and I often think about it with the Daleks, is that they are designed and behave like genocidal figures of hate, and yet there is a great affection amongst the population for them. We like things that represent essentially mechanized Nazism, and that's a curious there's a curious paradox at the heart of that, and a sort of love-hate that pulls in different directions, a fear and an affection, all at the same time. And I think that's why Doctor Who works so well, because the child within us fears them, but the adult, either that we aspire to be or then become, it has affection for them, because we know that they are containable and made up and not real, and all of that. So, but they do an exceptional job in the cultural landscape of our times by being concurrently figures of fear and affection, embodiments of evil and comfort. Interesting. They're not in this story. Frank Shale says, he shoots, he scores. Excellent win on the favourite thing. Oh, that was Pat Gorman Gate. Tune in last week if you want to see me stumbling accidentally into success, which is really the only way I've ever achieved it. Nick Jocelyn Mellish says, hi Nick. This feels a game changer. Will Ainley's tatty beard be in the running for the King's Demons now? Oh, this is Pat Gorman and his moustache again. So actually a lot of the chat is about not the commentary on episode 5 of Colony in Space, but the choosing of the favourite thing, which indeed did, I think, bring some drama into proceedings. I would say unusually, which I suppose is appropriate for Colony in Space. There was the odd little bit of drama when you least expect it. Joe McLachlan, Mad Paddington says, regarding single-button devices, I often think that with the sonic screwdriver. Oh, yes, I was talking about things where you press them and they do different things depending on what you're thinking, it seems. I think it is the most recent 13th Doctor audio where she gives it someone and says, use setting B17, and he shouts back, it's only got one button. It must be a very sensitive set of controls. Yes, I like that. That's a very good joke. Recolony in Space, I like it. No further comment. None needed, Joe. Jason Thompson, however, has written an essay. Most unexpected win there, says Jason. Clearly, background artists and facial hair should be given more consideration in this game going forward. Another reference to Pat Gorman Gate. Looking ahead to episode 6, since you wrote keep giving science in my copy of Running Through Corridors, as well as heckling your co-author. Yes, I saw Jason at the BFI only the other day, and Rob and I both signed his book, and I was mean to Rob while he was doing so. I shall do just that. Apologies, this is a bit long, so brace yourself. While explaining the Doomsday weapon to the Doctor, the Master refers to our sun one day burning through to its core and exploding. Current understanding is that our sun is too small to explode and will instead expand to a red giant before blowing off its outer layers and collapsing into a white dwarf. More a whimper than a bang. It'll still fry the Earth, though, so we'd better get on with building that arc to Refusis too. But what I really love is that a later line from the Master allows us to put an approximate date on the collapse of Exarian civilization, believe it or not. The weapon works instantaneously across interstellar distances, not limited by the speed of light. The Master says he could make the sun explode now, and it would be a rubbish weapon if you pointed at a star, pressed a button, and said, ha-ha, that star and all its planets will be destroyed in about 35,000 years. So when the Master talks about the Crab Nebula being the result of the test of the weapon, we can assume the star was destroyed at the same instant the weapon was fired. What does this have to do with putting a date on the test? Well, the Crab Nebula, also listed as M1 or NGC 1952, located in the constellation of Taurus, for any budding astronomers who may be listening, was the first nebula that astronomers were able to tie to an observed supernova. It was discovered in the mid-1700s, and once astrophotography became a thing in the late 1800s, it was extensively photographed. In the early 20th century, comparison of photographs taken several years apart showed it to be expanding. Working backwards from this, astronomers were able to connect its position and lifetime with observations by ancient Chinese astronomers of a bright star that appeared in the sky for a short time in 1054 AD, which we would now recognise as a supernova, an exploding giant star. We can't see the universe as it is right now, though. Light takes ages to reach us. Even the nearest star in our solar system is about 4 light years away, so we can only see it now as it was 4 years ago, when the light we receive here actually left it. Our best estimates place the Crab Nebula about 6,500 light-years from Earth. That means the light we see now from it took about 6,500 years to get here. This also means that the supernova that was observed in 1054 AD, or 1054 AD, actually took place some 6,500 years before then, or about 7,500 years ago from today. So, the Exarians tested their ultimate weapon about 7,500 years ago, then went into a decline. While we don't know how long that decline took, it is likely that, before humans built the Great Pyramid in Giza or Stonehenge, the Exarians had degenerated into primitives and priests, worshipping the remnants of their technological achievements and drawing rubbish pictures on walls to show it. The scenes between the Doctor and the Master are my favourite thing about Episode 6, and clearly were in the mind of RTD when he wrote The End of Time, and has the Doctor telling the Master that just seeing the universe would be ownership enough. I wonder if they will be your favourite thing too. Well, I don't know. I don't like to preempt, because sometimes I surprise myself, Jason. Thank you for that, Science Listen. We're being very Reithian. This is Doctor Who as Sidney Newman wanted it to be, in podcast form. In defence of paper files, says Jason, comes back again, because I was mulling over, I think I may have been short of things to say, there still being paper files in the future. Even in my lifetime, various data storage methods have become obsolete, and as someone routinely stymied by server failures and power cuts, paper has its appeal. All my university essays were on floppy disk. Now I don't even know anyone with a computer that has a floppy disk drive, and there is no other way to extract the information from them, even if I still had them. Who has a VHS player these days? Okay, I do, but most people I know don't. I can read a book written centuries ago, but I can't play an 8-track cassette from a few decades ago. Keep printed records, say I. That's a very good argument for there still being paper files. I like it, Jason. And David Gillespie Pratt adds, I find paper files so much easier for research as well. Scans of documents or born digital ones just don't have the feel, smell, or the frisson of paper. Oh yes, I definitely agree with that. I much prefer researching through paper than computer, but that those aesthetics aren't arguable enough for their continuation. But I think Jason's has a practical argument, definitely. And David Gillespie Pratt adds, the challenges of digital preservation are fascinating. If you wanted to keep a copy of, say, a video game in its original format, you'd need to have a suitable machine to play it on. So not only does that mean preserving the game, but also the tech to play it on. And then there's all the other questions connected to digital archiving, but I'll stop before boring you all to tears. Sometimes paper is just a lot easier. Yes, that's very true, David, and I suspect, in 20, 30 years' time, we will be looking at there will be lost Doctor Who footage because of how it was shot and how stuff was archived. There's certainly going to be lots of lost information, won't there be, because somebody changes their email address or deletes their hard drive, or their hard drive corrupts or whatever. And I think research in the future will be harder to do, and we'll probably get a lot of it from very unreliable sources, because people will take internet resources like Wikipedia, IMDb and Twitter at face value, whereas, of course, we know that they leave a lot to be desired. Jason Thompson says, yes, he's replying to David, NASA has a bunch of telemetry tapes from various space missions, manned and unmanned, from the 60s and 70s, that are now useless, even if they are still in an archive, because the machines to read them no longer exist. That would include Apollo 11 if that tape hadn't already been reused for another mission. Oh, Apollo. Oh, NASA, you are the BBC, and I claim my £5. Well, yeah, and I know I was talking to Chris Chapman about some of his archive interviews from documentaries where, say, he's just used a couple of snippets of somebody, but he interviewed them for 3/4 of an hour. And he said a lot of those are, for various reasons on how they were shot and how they were stored, are now very, very difficult or very expensive for him to run off copies off. So, and that's stuff done in the last 15 years. Calling out for a Looking for Pat documentary now, says Matt Foy about Pat Gorman. Do not think I haven't pitched that, Matt. Do not think I haven't pitched that once every 6 months. They haven't ruled it out, but I get the impression it would be very much that they would be humouring me if they did it. I think the real drive comes from me, but I'm driving very fast and very determinedly towards it. And who knows? I may have earned the right to pressure for something, and that may be it. Who knows? Shane Plays says, I've never noticed the microphony loud noise issue with videotape recordings before. Maybe because a lot more action scenes were done on video in the UK than in American TV. Oh, definitely, Shane. American TV does not have that issue in the same way because it's all shot on film. Yeah, it's definitely a studio problem. And too right, you get a point for that one, Toby, says Shane. I love the fact that everybody's been joining in to say that I deserve my point for my Pat Gormanage. This is a very, very particular and bespoke corner of the internet and podcasting, isn't it? Well done on the win, says Andrew Llewellyn. Thank you, Andrew. Fun fact. At the time of Colony in Space, Pat Gorman's moustache was married to the merkin used by Katie Manning in that infamous Dalek photo shoot. When they divorced a few years later, she got custody of Peter Capaldi's eyebrows. Andrew Llewellyn, wash your mouth out. John Hall, the king of emojis, adds the tilted head laughing emoji with tears pouring out of its eyes. Jasper says, I get what you mean about the TARDIS key not having a particularly mysterious world to contrast against, but I still really like the feeling there. Familiarity with an adventure is one of my favourite things about Doctor Who, and I guess it's doubly helpful when it's the first time away from UNIT in over a year. And I couldn't agree more. Roger Delgado is so charming, much like Pertwee's Doctor. I've only had him for about 7 months, but I love him very much, and I will not be letting him go. Thanks, Jasper. That is music to my ears when I read of people discovering something I've long had a love for, and it turns out that they like it too. Now, somebody on Twitter dropped me a line, and I want to mention this now because otherwise I will forget. But Joe Grant's wonderful, rather distinctive belt is the actual, or was the actual property of Katie Manning, because I was sent a publicity photograph of her in that belt from something else. It may actually have been on Blue Sky. You see, there are so many different ways to contact people that you could tell the politics of who's contacting you by where they contact you. But where have I put this? I might pause actually, because it's my pet hate when people look for things in real time on podcasts. So I'm going to press pause while I find this picture. I found it. It was on Twitter, so clearly put there by a fascist. I was led to it by Richard Bignell. So thanks, Biggers, who's already been of great value to this podcast with his John Pertwee correspondence facts. But classic Who style, Doc Who style, at Doc Who style on Twitter, has discovered Katie Manning wearing Joe's Colony in Space belt in a publicity photo taken at her home or something. She's wearing it with a different combo, with a funky shirt and pair of boots and what look like velvet trousers, but it's an excellent combo. And Classic Who Style have discovered that Katie made the belt herself. It was new and exciting, and you see it a lot in what Joe wore. I also made the belt, the silver thing on it. I beat that myself, having been taught by a silversmith. So that is a belt of Katie's making, the Colony in Space belt. So thank you, Classic Who Style and Richard Bignell. So there we go. That was definitely a fact that was new to me in Colony in Space. Simon Curtis says definitely worth 2 points. So that's Simon, who's actually the guest in this episode. Simon thinks I get 2 points for Pat Gorman and his moustache because they are both separate entities. Chris Williams says, hang on, Toby, did I miss something? What about the unresolved cliffhanger to episode 4? We've been waiting all week to find out. Did you get your laptop back? I hope so. Oh, well, I was all over social media doing that, Chris. You're wise if you've managed to avoid such drama. My laptop that I left on the train at Vauxhall was handed in the very next day, probably the same day, but I found out within 24 hours it had been handed in at Waterloo Station, which is only 2 stops from Vauxhall, so I think I was lucky where I left it. And everything therein remained. So there is a happy ending, there is honesty in the world, and somebody handed in my laptop and satchel that I was foolish enough to leave on the train. So thank you for your concern, Chris. When you started this story, it was just hours after I'd finished randomly watching it. Yesterday, I caught up with Happy Times and Places for parts 4 and 5, and then later turned the TV on. And what's on? Only Colony and Flippin' Space on You and Eden channel. Not only that, it's the drunk scene. I've just listened to a podcast today about this very scene, I exclaim to family members who are not in the least bit surprised. That's what I get up to while I'm working. This story is following me around. Coincidence? Well, yes. Thanks, Chris. Richard Bignell. If you could wade knee-deep in a clay slurry, dress up in various shades of beige, and capture a glimpse of alien arse, would that satisfy you? Ha ha ha! Very good, Richard. Oh, that should definitely be a famous quote of your. The discussion of Colony in Space has made me wonder about the thought processes Letts and Dicks put into deciding which of their stories would take the 6-part slots each year. Personally, some like The Sea Devils and The Green Death seem to fill the 6-part format admirably, but it feels that Colony, along with The Mind of Evil, Frontier in Space, and The Monster of Peladon, would possibly have worked much better trimmed of their slow wanderings and tightened up to be swifter 4-parters. The question is, if Colony had been reduced down, what existing 4-parters might have possibly withstood the expansion of another 2 episodes? Spearheads from Space, says John Hall. Day of the Daleks. Definitely not the 3 Doctors or Carnival of Monsters. But, well, Claws of Axos was written as a 7, wasn't it? And I can actually see Claws working if you serious it up a bit and you make Mr. Chin a bit less of a buffoon, and you wanted to add the murky government dealings. You could have an extra layer of sort of government conspiracy, and it could be a bit sort of X-Files-y, albeit with gold leotards. John Hall says, hopefully I post this before you do the commentary of part 6. You have, John, because I've been poorly. But I wanted to praise Pertwee's acting against the Guardian in this story. It can't have been easy keeping a straight face opposite a Cabbage Patch doll that's Sharon Stoning you, much less treat the thing with dignity, deference and respect. Yet Pertwee pulls it off admirably. Perhaps for British listeners, I should say that Pertwee succeeds admirably. You're right, John, because I made an allusion there. Yes, that sounds less rude. Sorry, John. Well, talking of The Guardian, somebody sent me, and I don't know where it is now, and I'm not going to look, but thanks to whoever it was sent me, it might have been John actually, sent me a picture of where you can see the actor behind the Guardian's wrist, sort of there, manipulating things. So yes, there is somebody definitely behind that chair, which is why it's seated in chair. So that's how the Guardian is achieved. Joel Ahrens from the other side of the world says, here's what I want to say. I never liked this story. I'm still not sure I like it now. But what I do is revel in the love the others show for it. It makes me see it and appreciate it a whole other way. Does it make me like the story any better? No, not really. But the positive vibes for this and other unloved stories, that's what this community is about. Love you all. Oh, Joel, that's made my day. Thanks, mate. And it seems especially nice that that's wound its way around from the other side of the world as well. I think that's an embodiment there of what Doctor Who can do, what all the people whose names I'm reading out do, certainly for my day, and I hope that we radiate that out with this podcast. And the inner world, where I like being cynical, I like being cross with things, but I think it's nice to have somewhere where we can provide an antidote to that as well, and maybe show. And I think I've been thinking a lot recently whether I've wasted my life liking Doctor Who. Because there surely are more important and worthy things to be doing. And I'm sure I had greater ambition than to spend my life sitting in a booth being unnecessarily positive about pieces of television that most people couldn't give 2 hoots about. But there is something special, isn't there, about what it does and how it pulls us together, and sometimes is all we need to make our day a little bit better. And sometimes I think that's an achievement, isn't it? Well done, Doctor Who. Mr. M.L. Dunstan, who is one of the newest patrons. Come and be a patron if you're not. I'm sure everyone, including Mr. M.L. Dunstan, is having fun and not regretting their decision. And one of the things that he gets for becoming a patron, for as little as £3 a month, everybody, is that he gets to comment on the stories. That's one of the advantages of actually being a paying member. And he says there is no such thing as a bad Pertwee story. But this one, although good, it's a bit dull in places. The regular and guest cast are good, though. A lot of people said this was the worst Pertwee story. Not so. That goes to the Time Monster. Pertwee and Manning are so good. It lifts the story somewhat. Was this Helen Worth's only acting credit apart from Gail Tilsley in Coronation Street? I think that's the only thing I've seen her in. No, she'd actually done a surprising amount of television. I mean, only a dozen or so things. Odd Wednesday Play, I think, an episode of Zcast. But no, her CV before Colony is pretty strong. And then, of course, she goes into Coronation Street and is in it for literally 50 years, so she doesn't have time to do much else. But I've always thought she was a very good actress and probably would have had a good career outside of Coronation Street. But I think she always had plenty to do in the soap, and it's some actors crave, well, all actors crave security, but some then decide after a while that they need the variety back, and to hell with the security, and a lot of people regret that because it's a big wide world out there. But she decided to stay with the soap, and good for her. But I am glad that we do have this example of her in the other big programme, if you like, which is Doctor Who. And this story, Colony in Space, and I always think she's not in all of the episodes because she's not a massive role in it, but she actually is, isn't she? So it's a decent part as well. It's more than a cough and a spit. But anyway, I shall try to neither cough nor spit, because that makes terrible radio, as I watch Colony in Space, Episode 6, the final instalment. Thanks to everybody who corresponded. I hope you liked listening to what they had to say. And we're going to get on with the business of watching and concluding the Third Doctor's first foray into outer space with Episode 6 of Colony in Space, which I'm going to press play on BBC iPlayer in 3, 2, 1. So it's the last time I will be venturing into Colony in Space. It's not a story I watch an awful lot. I do occasionally. Occasionally I'm in the mood for something leisurely and not a big hitter. So it's not one I'm, I would say I was really unfamiliar with. But there's levels of unfamiliar, isn't there? I'm sure I've watched it since I did it for Running Through Corridors, so I've watched it in the past decade, but although it's I wouldn't say I can necessarily always see what's coming. Like the Master there. I'm looking at the primitives do look more vivid, don't they, on the screen on the VT in the studio. This one seems this actually, the colour of this seems a bit more vivid. Oh, there was somebody. The Doctor Who classic styles Twitter feed that I mentioned before also says where Joe's jumper comes from. I don't, as well as being geographically blind, I don't remember the name of fashion houses, but it also showed there was a different colour scheme as well. I think a black and red, anyway. That Twitter feed, which I would urge you to have a look at, because it can speak fashion fluently, which I certainly cannot, has details like that, and it's traced things like not just Joe's belt but also her jumper. I don't think they've traced where the primitives' loincloths comes from. House of Cloth. Christiane Flanelle. Coco Flanelle. I see what they're trying to do with these cave paintings, but they do look like a sort of chalk paint pen on perspex, which I suppose is a futuristic version of cave drawings, which I suppose is a logical thing that you would do if you were doing the sort of sci-fi equivalent of cave paintings. But because, of course, cave paintings would make you think of Neanderthal man or whatever. I suppose it is a society that has regressed, but it's good to see the pens. The pens are, unless I suppose they were drawn thousands of years ago when the pens was. So they're ancient drawings, but made more futuristically than the creatures that are living there, which I think is nice, interesting sci-fi. Bernard's Katie liked Bernard. She called him an actor's actor, which I like. And yes, Caldwell is a good character, isn't he? They're all good characters, and this all works. I love all the IMC stuff, and I like that Caldwell is tested once more. And he's a good actor, Caldwell, isn't he? He does a bit of subterfuge. Quick before I change my mind, yeah. So he's still fighting with his conscience. But yeah, So I quite like the idea of the cave painting, and I like the rapport that the Master and the Doctor have. They're not always sneering at each other, and I like the sort of gentlemanliness of Roger Delgado. In fact, actually, I think the Master is more polite than Doctor Who. John Pertwee's Doctor's a bit of an arse, and Roger Delgado, apart from the mass murder and the cold-blooded killing, is I think actually, if you met him at a dinner party, you'd like him more than Doctor Who. Which I think is really quite interesting. And he's obviously more soberly dressed too. He's so good, isn't he? Although did I say Maurice Perry didn't rate him much, but Maurice could be quite funny. And obviously Pertwee respects Delgado. I know he could be testy, but I think there was a lot with Pertwee where he was not sure of himself as an actor, was he? Lest we forget, it's his first drama role in a television studio, and he's playing the leading man in a very high turnover, technically challenging television program. So for that, I think he does a marvelous job. But he's very much a sort of leading man kind of actor, where there's sometimes no acting required, and that's not pejorative. Some of the great stars play roles where there is, in inverted commas, no acting required, but that takes natural talent and, of course, no little technical skill. You have to have an understanding of camera and lights and all of those sorts of things, which are harder than they look. I like the Master's line there about you take a deep breath. That's very funny. And we've got here Chekhov's Winton, mentioning Winton because he will come in. He will be important later. But yes, the Master and the Doctor do have a great rapport. And how do we? Yes, because they do know each other of old. But if I knew somebody that had killed that many people, and I really like this dynamic here, where Ash, who's decent but he's beaten, is being blunt with Captain Dent, and Captain Dent is being cold but professional. He's not being cruel, or he's not showing cruelness, but he is being a bully. But it's not done with sort of handbags at dawn, which I rather like about it. I like the dynamic of the coldness of Dent and the rabbit courage, if you like, of poor old Ash. Yeah, they're great characters. I like the colour of these cave walls as well. There's something about the glistening and the black. It's very hard to do caves in a studio, as even Caves of Androzani shows, which is one of the most successful ones. But because obviously it's essentially their corridors that have had a bit of texture added. Because I don't think you'd ever quite make corridors like this out of caves. But I think we have a translation convention really when we watch these sorts of things. Oh, poor old Ash and soon-to-be Gail Tilsley. And that's Les Clark, the one with the moustache. He's a stuntman who lived to be, I think, if he didn't make it to 100, he got pretty damn close. I love this bit because Captain Dent has been cool and calm and calculated and professional in the face of everything that's gone on, and he very rarely lets his guard down. And I quite like that now that he's won. And he obviously doesn't like the colonists. He obviously has a certain amount of disdain for them, but he has to keep his professional cool. And I just like that little idea that when there's nobody left and it's pretty much done, he goes and tears their stuff off the wall because he's had enough of it. It's just, a nice little subtle touch that suggests that there's a lot bubbling underneath this guy, but he's the way he is for a reason. This is Terry Walsh as the guard, so he's of course going to get attacked, and if he's not high enough to fall off something, so instead I think they have a muddy battle, don't they? Did I mention this before? I'm made very uncomfortable by the colour scheme on Winton's top. Or is it because the trousers are dungarees? But it looks like his jacket's too short and his back's poking out. Now it's not. It's just that it's a sort of pinky, a pinky, almost flesh-coloured jumper. But it looks really uncomfortable, and I always get a chill wind round my love handles when I see it, because his jacket is sort of short. So yeah, it looks like his jacket is poking up, and his skin is poking out. But this is a nice showpiece battle for episode 6. They've sort of gone, we've got this environment. Let's have the stuntman and the very brave Nicholas Pennell, who is throwing himself into it. He's not a stuntman. Terry Walsh is. And he's getting thrown about, but Nicholas Pennell, and it looks like he makes contact there. It gets him on the chin, and then so that's a nice bit of splashing about. That's looking at the environment and saying, how can we make use of this for a sequence that is sort of memorable and visually so in an environment that struggles for visual eclecticism, shall we say, and anything particularly striking. And this is clever. So we see Ash here, and we've had Chekhov's ropey equipment since the very beginning. We know they're flying in a knackered old ship. So, and there's a real dignity, isn't there, about John Ringham, who, we were introduced to in the Doctor Who universe as Toxel, perhaps the most evil man, and the most demonstrably evil man in the first year of the show. But he's washed his face and grown a beard, and it's a much more sort of nice and decent performance, and actually more the performance I associate John Ringham with. He tended to play as Penny's dad in Just Good Friends. He tends to be a good guy. I wish I had a proper conversation with him, and I hadn't been trying to be professional. Anyway, I did have proper conversations with Bernard Kay, but I got drunk during a lot of them, so a lot of those are as lost as his episodes of The Faceless Ones. And it's a horrible moment, this. And I really like it because it's horrible, and it's a good bit of body. And look, I think Bernard cries here. Look, he wipes a tear from his eye. I suppose you could read it that he didn't like the explosion, but I read that as a tear, which is it's a mature piece of emotion acting in Doctor Who, and Caldwell has that terrible thing of he was the one that told them the motors were all right, and he has that line there. So that's one of those bits that gets me. That's one of those bits of Doctor Who, of drama writing, of sci-fi moments, a bit like a good old self-sacrifice. I like a sort of bit of guilt. Well, and it turns out that this has got a self-sacrifice element to it as well. But I think that's a really effective moment, well done by both Katie Manning and by Bernard Kay. So that's a lovely moment. Captain Dent tearing the thing off is a lovely moment. And I've been kind of prompted. Now, this is unusual for somebody to say, oh, are you going to choose this bit? And so now I'm doubting myself and going, oh, I'd have probably been talking about that orange thing, or talking about when once I wore a sock worn by an actor who played a primitive or something, one of my usual boring stories. Where that stuff about the Crab Nebula that's great, because that's a bit Sidney Newman-y as well, because kids might go and look up the Crab Nebula, as young Jason Thompson clearly did, but it makes it sound, it gives it a real sounding scientific basis when it ties in, when something big and Doctor Who. It's like when a historical event we know about ties in with an alien invasion in the past or whatever, Pudding Lane or whatever. I think we like it when there's something that we know about at school is tied in. So if you'd been doing science and you'd learnt about the Crab Nebula and then it's mentioned in Doctor Who, I think that rather neatly fits into the world as we know it, and I think that's always exciting, especially if you're a kid. But it also effectively demonstrates the size and power of the weapon. But Yeah, so Jason is thinking that I might choose at the moment between the rapport between the Doctor and the Master. Ah, yes, the old good old Bernard, the old punch on the back of the spine, like the karate chop on the back of the neck, is a good way to knock someone out. Although I suppose you could say the Primitive went forward and then hit his head on the car, and they're funny looking things, aren't they? I can't quite get an angle on the Primitives. They're a weird design, but I rather like that. It means they're slightly indiscernible to me. They're slightly indistinct, and I always think that's a good quality in a monster, because you can't necessarily see their absolute outline in your head, which makes them seem alien in more than one sense of the word. So here we have, yes, the Doctor and the Master chatting. These two do have a great rapport. I think Pertwee always raises his game with Delgado. I think it's clear that he respects him, and that's always nice. That somebody as testy and dismissive as Pertwee can be, I think on camera and off, actually has this lovely mutual respect thing going on with the Doctor and the Master and Pertwee and Delgado. And that's actually also nice that Delgado, who could sort of easily maybe run rings around him, doesn't. I think he's a very respectful co-actor as well. So here we have lots of paper, because in the future they've learnt not to rely on hard drives. That's what I meant to say last week. He's so good, Morris, isn't he? He's thinking of what's going on outside the room, but he's not over demonstrative. But there's so much going on inside. He's such a clever, watchable, beguiling actor, I think. And Tony Caunter's been brilliant as the Heavy here as well. They are so good. And I do rather like Pertwee's sort of dismissiveness about galactic conquest being like a silly thing to do. And I love the way Delgado points and everything. His body language is so cool. I also sometimes worry about the practicality of saying, we could rule the universe because we've got this big weapon. How does the admin work? Because it's one thing to say, I'm on this planet with a massive weapon and could wipe you all out. But how do you then organise what it is you want them to do, and how do you rule them? I mean, how would you rule a planet like Earth, let alone the entire universe? I suppose you'd have to have people on each planet sorting out the things you want them reporting back to you, but some of them would be working against you, So, I think it would be quite. You'd need many a minion. Yay! I feel the colour is slightly better on this episode. It's looking like a rather more vivid adventure than perhaps previous ones, and I wonder if it's something to do with the print or the restoration. He's so good. Do you know, I think this is why, Doctor Who always built to me, because it is so dependent on its actors, and it's why I've always admired good acting, especially in stuff that's not high art, as it were, because this stands and fails on the commitment and the inventiveness and the brilliance of the actors. And I think Doctor Who's, seeing as it always gets reported for wobbly sets and bad acting, it really doesn't have it. And British television is awash in this period with really good actors doing really good work. Yes, and of course performance styles change, and you do get the odd person who gets an inexplicable amount of work and isn't very good, but that doesn't happen so much in Doctor Who, I don't think. And I don't know how I feel about this idea that an entire species wipes itself out, because is that in order to not have the weapon? Couldn't they have destroyed the weapon but survived as a species? I love the way that I think that's slightly unintentionally funny. That Doug goes, "Is it this button?" And he goes, "No," with his space shake of the head, and then yes with his space nod. But And I love the way, actually, I love the way that John Pertwee refers to alien races as Sir. He has this sort of oldie-worldy British formality and charm about him that I rather like, and I think we should aspire to. There's many things about colonialism and the empire and all that sort of thing that are problematic, and we should rightly consider and think about. But I actually think that sort of old world courtesy is one. It's a brilliant juxtaposition with the outer worldly oddness. But also, I think it's a brilliant dynamic for the Doctor, who is sort of unflappable and very polite, even when talking to a shriveled up prune beast in a chair. But it's odd that somebody like Malcolm Hulke, for whom we have whole rafts of his books that sort of emphasize how important individual life is, that the savages, in inverted commas, here are kind of dispensable. And that's a brilliant shot, though, isn't it? And that's a wonderful rock edifice, and whatever they've put there to sort of blend in with it, in order to make that entrance or dress that entrance or whatever, and be able to take an explosion. I think that's really impressive and effective. I think that's great. That really feels like epic stuff for this period in the show's history, and is really well done. But yes, this idea that the primitives are sort of, and now I know the Doctor tries to stop them and everything, but it seems an odd beat for the story. It kind of gets rid of them as an inconvenience, whereas I think I would have preferred it if they'd kind of tried to live in peace with the colonists rather than just been sort of wiped out. And it seems to suggest that because they're a regressed form of life, they're somehow disposable, and that is slightly at odds, I think, with the humanity that the Pertwee era aspires to. No microphony here because we're on videotape. So we have quite a nice battle, and we can start spotting. There's Dinny Powell, or is it Nosher Powell? I think that might be Nosher, actually, Nosher or Dinny. One of the famous Powell brothers, who's and Greg was a junior Powell who does the. Is that now Morgan gets who Greg does the Night in the Time Monster. Now that's really odd, because I notice you have this IMC guy run away, but you don't see what. You see, now you're expecting him to get shot there and fall down, and he doesn't. So that's an odd move to have that staging of him running away to not then facilitate a stunt. And Morgan's death is in a really brief shot, and for such a big character, it's a real shame, I think, that he doesn't get. Maybe he should have got to run away and got shot at the top of a hill and rolled down, but I think he should definitely have had a moment, so that there he is being checked out by Winton and by Caldwell, but we don't then get a close-up. We don't get an indication from them, or Caldwell going, he was a colleague, but he was a bit of a wrong-un, or whatever. So I think for such an important character, especially as we now don't see Captain Dent again either, that seems odd for a story with such strong characters. And again, it's for somebody like Hulke, who puts so much into his characters and is so thoughtful about his characters' backgrounds, it seems odd for their end journey not to quite have the closure that it needs. Especially, I mean, Dent gets no on-screen comeuppance or moment at all, which I find really odd in a story that is not exactly jam-packed with moments you couldn't lose or cut down. Oh, Ash sacrificed. I think that's really lovely. It's terribly moving, and I think Ash is a really good character as well. He doesn't have the bells and whistles that the IMC men have, but John Ringham is brilliant, gives him a quiet dignity, and he's not a pushover. He does stand up for himself, but with a quiet dignity, and dignity very much. I think that voice might have been Gorman, because you don't see who this character is. It's not these guys. It wasn't one of these guys speaking, the Ambassadors of Death guy, and he looks a bit like the War Chief moustache guy. But yeah, I think John Ringham does a lovely job, and I am a sucker for a human sacrifice if they're done properly, not a human sacrifice. No, I'm not an Aztec. For a character, a self-sacrifice at the end of a drama, if it's done properly and not just pasted on because you don't understand how they work, Chris Chibnall. And isn't it nice? Oh, he's undone his zip a little bit. Isn't it nice that and I think Bernard could handle himself. He could ride a horse, so I think he'd been pretty good. He'd have been a pretty good colonist, and I think you'll be all right. I think you'll all get on, but you've already got the moustache, so that's really nice. The TARDIS not fading away, but doing what it does, blink with a blink of an eye. It's a good job the TARDIS doesn't land where it took off from. Otherwise, I think it would have squashed the Brigadier, wouldn't it? Oh no, maybe not. A nice epitaph here for Nicholas Courtney, who's had a few weeks off, but will still get second. Will he get second billing? Oh, did I see a boom microphone there? Anyway, so that's the Doctor's first visit into space, and he's not been away. They've not been away. So Jo is actually older now than she is in real life. No, in real life she's older than she is on the calendar. So actually her birthdays and things like that, they're not going to be quite the same. They don't consider that, do they? So the Master still gets second billing because he's done a bit more. So that's the first sign that Nicholas Courtney's second billing is not unassailable, as we will see as the era progresses. Bernard Kay, there we go. That's Bernard's last appearance in Doctor Who. He continued to have an excellent career. I mean, towards the end, as he was getting older, nobody works as much, and he could be tricky. He lost a good booking at the RSC, and that certainly stung with him. He was supposed to be playing Friar Lawrence, and something happened with the director, but he ended up staying for the whole season, playing the other. Because when you do the RSC, you do a season playing parts of various sizes, but if you're one of the leading actors, you at least get one decent leading role. And he had other goodish roles, but he certainly lost his major one, but still stayed for the season. I was going through the paperwork about it, and I think Equity found in his favour in the end that he'd been treated very badly. He decided not to fight it because I think he just wanted to get on with it, really. But I know that stung because he was 63 when that happened, but he was still acting when he was in his 80s. He did an episode of Harry Hill. He did some stage stuff, but he wasn't acting as much as he would have liked, and that's all he lived for, really. He was a single man, and because his wife had died in 1977, his wife Patsy was originally married to Michael Caine. So Bernard helped bring up Michael Caine's daughter. He was essentially her stepfather. And he loved Patsy. Patricia Haynes, an excellent actress, but when she died, that kind of broke him as well. He was a bit devoted to her, and I don't think he ever got over that. Though he did have relationships. He was a bit of a roister-doister, actually. But anyway, that's his last appearance in Doctor Who. And I'm very glad I got to meet him through the commentary of this, and we struck up a friendship that endured until he died on Christmas Day. Anyway, and that was that 10 years ago? It was over 10 years ago. Gosh, so he'd have been 96 now. Wow. He'd have still been as strong as an ox. Anyway, what are my favourite things about Colony 6? I do like the way the Doctor says, "Thank you, sir," to the Guardian. I like the way that John Pertwee's Doctor is with aliens in that very formal and polite manner. I think that's something that's unique to him, but really absolutely fits the Doctor and Doctor Who, just in terms of what it represents, but also how it helps the dynamic of the series. I like the rapport between the Doctor and the Master and their scenes together in the alien city. I love the bit where Captain Dent rips down the map because it shows some of the fury that he's been keeping suppressed, which he has to do in his job, and because that's how his modus operandi work. And I like the bit where Bernard wipes a tear, I think it's a tear, and says, I told them that their engines were safe. And I love Ash's self-sacrifice at the end. So I've got an awful lot of things to choose from for this episode. And going in, I think I might have chosen the Dent moment. I think Bernard's tear was my favourite bit, but I also liked Ash's self-sacrifice. But this time I've been really taken with, and it's something I've touched upon before, but I don't think I've ever highlighted enough, and I do think it is a strength, and I think I often overlook the regulars and the Doctor, and I was really taken. I love the way that John Pertwee's Doctor addresses aliens in a really polite and formal manner, especially as he could be so testy and difficult sometimes with people he doesn't like. And I think showing that sort of respect as we understand it in a very British framework really does wonders for the show. It makes it sort of charmingly funny, but it also makes sense, and it also aids with the juxtaposition of the fantastical in the ground and all of that sort of thing. And it helps with the character of the Doctor. It helps with his eccentricity, and but it also it shows a nicer side to Pertwee as well, that he can sometimes forget to show when he's being a bit of a git. So I think I'm going to choose the way that the Doctor is with the way that the Doctor addresses the Guardian, and just generally is with alien species. And my favourite thing about Colony in Space as a whole, well, I think we've talked a lot about how it's, generally regarded as at the lower end of the Pertwees. And I think that it stands as a great example of a story that probably isn't one of the best Pertwees. And yet, as we've discovered, well, I hope as I have tried to uncover or explain sounds wrong, because I'm not here broadcasting down to you. I'm chatting to you. You just can't say anything back. My favourite kind of conversation. But I don't think I'm here to be giving lessons. So I've outlined. I like how I've outlined or discovered or reconnected with the idea that there's so many good things here, from the fundamentals, the cast. The ideas behind it, I think, are phenomenal. Some nice directorial touches, some really good characterization. Malcolm Hulke is not necessarily a whiz-bang writer, but he does subtle moments very well. And some of its flaws are frustrating. The lack of a comeuppance for Captain Dent and things like that. It seems so obvious that at the first script meeting you'd go, we really need to. Well, they didn't really have script meetings though. They said, well, but once you'd got all the scripts in, surely somebody would have said that's a major thing we've got to address. And obviously it could be tightened up, but name me a Pertwee story that couldn't be. And at least this is not all the same. I think it's partially because the planet is such a dreary environment, but that kind of works for the setting. That's the whole point. It's supposed to be somewhere where these people are starving to death. Now that doesn't help with the visuals, but I actually think some of the visuals there in episode 6 that we had of the planet were really good, and this episode, as I say, looked a little bit more vivid. So maybe those things don't help. But I know people at the time who watched it found it a disappointment. So I could twist and turn and give all sorts of reasons why it doesn't deserve its reputation. It has its reputation because of people who experienced it at the time and people who've experienced it since. But nonetheless, even so, it has I don't think I have to work too hard to find moment after moment, aspect after aspect of this story that aren't just good or better than you'd expect, that are absolute solid gold. So even on the dreariest, clayest planet, which is barren and where nothing grows, it's worth mining. IMC had something. It's worth mining because there are rich seams of gold there to be had within Colony in Space. So I think the thing I like about it overall is that it's an unassuming, pretty unloved slice of Doctor Who that nonetheless has so many aspects of what makes Doctor Who great, and is well worth visiting, even if it's not one that you would rush to visit immediately if you were thinking, I fancy a slice of Pertwee. But I can guarantee you, if ever you do, especially on a sort of leisurely Sunday afternoon maybe, or late at night when everyone's gone to sleep, well, maybe not, you might go to sleep during it, but I didn't. I'm doing this after midnight. Yeah. So I think it's that. I think it's that even in the humblest, the stories with the humblest reputation like this, something like this, you give it a go. You go in with the right frame of mind, and boy, there's a load of lovely stuff. So, Colony Ep 6. I'm going to see what Simon has today say, and he's doing a bonus thing. So let's see if either, it doesn't matter which he chooses for what. If any of these cover my things, I will get a point. And but I mean, I have to say, just the Pat Gorman last week kind of means I'm successful.
Episode 6, honourable mention for Terry Walsh and his fight in the clay with Winton. Hats off to them. But it sort of goes back to Malcolm Hulke and his plotting in this case. And the reveals of Caldwell finally turning to be on the side of the goodies. And then the final reveal at the end that the colonists weren't on the spaceship. Because we've seen throughout that Caldwell disagrees with Dent's methods, but it just appears to have fallen in line with Dent just because it's the safest thing for him to do. So now when he turns and joins the side of the colonists and helps Joe, it's a great moment. But even then we think it's all in vain, because after the ship's blown up, that's sort of ignored for a while we go off with the Doctor and the Master, and forgotten, as if it's been forgotten about. So when they turn up against the skyline to turn the tables on IMC, it's a very satisfying end. I hope you've enjoyed Colony in Space. I know I always do. Thank you, Toby.
Oh, yeah, good choices both. And actually, of course, yes, in saying how much I enjoyed the self-sacrifice of Ash and what a good character he was and what a good performance, that is a brilliant moment, because I think you genuinely, do... I think that how have they got out of that? Something's happening because Winton has stayed behind. But it's still a kind of, but what's happened there? Because they don't draw too much. They don't go, we can only see Ash or something like that. They go, it's a bad picture and it's the best we could do because of the technology. So you think, it's the technology. You're not thinking, they're not showing that the rest of the colonists aren't there. I think it's well done enough that that's a moment where even if you guess it, you go, that's still pretty good. That's a nice piece of plotting. And again, the fact that the answer to it is not revealed for a bit means it's you come back to and go, oh God, yes, what happened to the colonists? Phew, okay. So I think that is very well done. And Caldwell, I think, is a great character, but they were all great characters. But yeah, I'm really pleased that you draw attention to Caldwell because, of course, it was my lovely friend Bernard. Yes, I'm sad that he's dead. But I'm happy I got to know him. But that makes me sad because he's dead now. That's the terrible thing of the fortune that I've had to get to know so many people from the show that I love, which was my dream when I pored over those names when I was a kid with Doctor Who magazines, learning the names of actors. The idea that I'd brush past one as they came out of a stage door was, tantalising enough. But to have actually spent time socially with them and communicated with them and received nice comments from them because I know Bernard listened to a radio play that I wrote called The Public Purse, which had a character in it called Bernard Caldwell. He said that he noticed the character was called Bernard. He'd forgotten, I think, that he played a character called Caldwell in Colony in Space, but that was my nod to him. I think I did then tell him. And he didn't run away. What's the bonus thing for Simon?
My bonus thing about Colony in Space is Jon Pertwee. How can I not talk about him? He's my favourite Doctor. When you say Doctor Who to me, I see Jon Pertwee. He was the first one I saw in the Sea Devils, BBC Two, 1992. Still my favourite story. He's fantastic. He's got some great lines in this story. It's just wonderful. I love him. He is the Doctor. There is no other.
Yeah, that's very nice. I'm pleased, Simon, because I've never been. I would never have Pertwee in my sort of dazzling favourite Doctors, even though I really liked him when I first saw him. Before you watched the Sea Devil, Simon, I first saw John Pertwee in the Five Faces of Doctor Who, repeats of Carnival of Monsters, and the Three Doctors. And I liked him then, and I liked his leather gloves and his velvet jacket, and he just seemed such a natural Doctor to me. And then, and I've said this before, when I got his stories on VHS and bootlegs and everything like that, they never quite matched up to my expectations. Of course, I wasn't watching them in the best quality a lot of the time, but they were more 70s than I'd imagined, and the 70s was quite close then. So things like flares and kipper ties and that sort of thing were a little bit embarrassing, partially because I was a kid who wore hand-me-down clothes, and I quite often had clothes that reminded people of fashions gone by, and I had the piss taken out of me. So those sorts of things and bad CSO lines always brought me out in hives. So it was all the Pertwee era was always something of a compromised watch for me, and a bit of a disappointment, and I think John Pertwee suffered as a result of that. And I don't think he's the most nuanced of actors, and I don't think he can do some of the emotional depths or indeed variation that a lot of the other actors can do. But he is Doctor Who. He is one of those people that walks into a room and is immediately the most interesting person. He has a natural flair, a natural elan, the way he wears clothes, contrary to his predecessor, who's an absolute shambles. Yeah, John Pertwee is really elegant, and his wardrobe is eccentric but without looking stupid. It all fits him like a glove, and again, the way that he bats back and forth with Roger Delgado, the way he speaks to aliens. So I get a little bit at this point, I think. And over the years, I have learnt to stop worrying and to love John Pertwee for what he is. Although, I've even some of the comments from Happy Times and Places, when we get to Pertwee, people say, he is a bit of a git, he is a bit mean, he can be a bit testy and frosty and a bit of a bully, and I get all of that as well. So maybe my initial I never disliked him, but the reason he never ascended to the heights of my absolute favourites was maybe maybe there was something in it. But actually, I think he's a brilliant Doctor Who. I think he's a true Doctor Who, and I think he's Doctor Who from top to toe. And there's quite a lot of him as well, so that's quite a lot of Doctor Who. So yeah, I'm glad you chose Pertwee, and I had a little touch of Pertwee there, didn't I, in my favourite thing for episode 6. But I was never going to win this, but I'm just happy to have got. I'm going to give myself 2 points for last week for Pat Gorman and his moustache. But still, you win, Simon, and that's absolutely fine. That's Simon Curtis, who is a genuine television professional. Worked for on many episodes of not Doctor Who but Doctors, so knows what he's talking about. And I'm thrilled that he offered his services to this, and he offered his insight into a much maligned slice of Doctor Who that I hope, even if I haven't won you over, it's made you think fondly of this particular piece of the show. So as I record this, I've not been very well. I've been a bit I didn't test positive for COVID, but I've been rather knocked out. So it's nice to be back in the saddle, and I hope wherever you are very well, and that you don't have to have a week or so of being absolutely fatigued. But if you do, the worst things to do than watch Doctor Who and the Doomsday Weapon, as I initially knew it. Colony in Space. Doctor Who and the Doomsday Weapon is a much better title, isn't it? Colony in Space is, yes, it's a not funny old title. Why did they call it that? It is about a colony in space, but and space is good, particularly in the Pertwee era. You go, I'd do some space, but yeah, there's a colony. Yeah, what is it? Okay, gang of people. That's exciting. Village of the galaxy, or interstellar encampment. He's not doing it for me, Malcolm. You were quite right to change it to the doomsday weapon. And, of course, IMC then persevered in a few books, don't they? They get a name check in some of the John Peel, one of the John Peel Daleks books and everything. But anyway, that's for another time. I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that. I found it lovely to come with a fresh pair of eyes onto this old story and to find that there was much to enjoy. So I hope you've had a good time, and I hope you're well, and I will speak to you the next time we decide to turn the places and times that we are in into happy ones. Until then, ta-ta. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Simon Curtis. I'm grateful to Simon and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Stephen Moffat, Tim Dickinson, Sean Ditchfield, Drew, DWFan91, Andrew East, Jeff Edwards, Andrew Egan, Patrick Emery, Jonathan Evans, Bill Evanson, Simon Farker, Jasper Ferguson, Fleet Boy, Mark Findlay Smith, Philip Fitchett, Nev Fountain, Matt Foy, David Gates, David Gillespie Pratt, Charles Gears, Lisa Gledhill, James Gould, Graham, don't have your surname Graham, Paul Greaves, Paul J. Guest, Angus Gulliver, Aaron Gullias, William Hames, John Handcock, Steve Hatcher, Owen Hargreaves, Matthew Harris, Richard Harris, Michael Harvey, Duncan Harvey, Ronald Hayden, Paul Hayes, Matthew Herbert, Stephen Hill, Simon Hodges, Andrew Hodson, Sam Hollingsworth, and Matthew Hooliston. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like to become a patron, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where for as little as £3 a month you get advance releases, you get bonus content, you get exclusive content, you get 3 releases a week generally, as opposed to out here in the everyday world where you just get 1, and some of those releases are just for you, including behind the scenes looks at some of the DVDs and Blu-rays that I am involved with little bits of exclusive content, or sometimes little bits of exclusive access to the stars of the shows themselves, as well as interviews from my archive and all sorts of other goodies. Everything is available at the lowest tier, which is £3 a month. And if you don't want to do that or don't fancy a monthly commitment, well, then you can just go to ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock, and give the odd donation whenever you can. If you can't do anything financial, I completely understand, and I am grateful to you for listening. But if you could go to all the places where these are available and give the much needed 5 stars, thumbs up, likes, subscriptions, and if you can bear it, and I'd love it if you could, a few lines of review saying what it is you like about these. That just helps to make these more noticeable in the big, vast, overcrowded space that is the internet. And, we need all the help that we can get to stand out from the crowd. And I'm helping to clog up the overcrowded space that is the internet by being on so many of the social media. I'm on Instagram at toby.haydock. I'm on Twitter at Haydock Podcasts at Toby Haydock. I'm on Blue Sky at Toby Haydock and all the bits that go with it. And whereas I've got a website, tobyhaydock.com, and my comedy club, Excess Malarkey, is at Excess Malarkey, and that's on Blue Sky and on Instagram, the picture one. So come and see me do comedy sometime. That'd be nice. Excess Malarkey Comedy Club, which is every Tuesday in Manchester, and Testing is the last Sunday of the month in Manchester. And it's again, it follows what I try and do, which is charge as little as possible and put on as good entertainment as I possibly can. And the comedy club this year has had the likes of James Acaster and Mike Wozniak, as well as burgeoning comics from the circuit as well, and in a really nice environment where we don't let in stag do's, hen do's, or office parties. So definitely worth checking out. Well, and there we go. I really enjoyed that one. I hope you did too. It was nice to remember my friend Bernard. I was going through his boxes of stuff. I've been sorting out my archive and my stuff, so I was going through a few of his bits and bobs. He was very affected by that situation with the Royal Shakespeare Company. But interestingly, when he did that, he was understudying Julian Glover. So that's interesting that the the two sort of guest stars of the Crusade, Richard the Lionheart and Saladin, two sides of the same coin, were both playing Henry IV, but Bernard as Julian Glover's understudy. So I'd have liked to have seen Bernard do Henry IV, but he played Glendower most of the time, which is a great part, but I think it's only one scene, isn't it? Whereas Friar Lawrence, you see, that would have given a real boost to him late in his career. He did do the Inspector Calls, the Stephen Daldry one, and he did that with Paul Shelley and I think Rula Lenska, and then Alison Fisk. So good actors. Yeah, it's a beastly career. It's a shit business, as Mark Gator says. Is it Les in the League of Gentlemen? Anyway, sorry, I'm being all reflective, but it was nice to see Bernard, and I'm sad that was his last Doctor Who. I'd have been interested to see him face off against Tom Baker. There's no reason he couldn't have been in Doctor Who again. But it's funny how we sort of associate people with certain periods, and some actors who do quite a lot with the first three Doctors, or maybe the first three in the start of Tom Baker. But then by the time I'm watching, those actors don't seem to be anywhere near the show. So I was always quite excited if I discovered that an actor from old Who, like Brian Grellis or somebody had popped up in a John Nathan Turner story that had been my era, because it felt like it connected me with the ancient past. Because of course, when Snake Dance was on, The Revenge of the Cybermen was so long previously, whereas of course now it looks to me like they're a blink of an eye apart. But at the time, anyway, I'm wandering off piste as I am wont to do. I'm going to go to bed because I'm very tired. But yes. I've been wiped out all week. Yes, Patreonville hasn't been very exciting, but I've done my best. I dragged some stuff out of places and popped on. Oh, and yes, my if you were worried about my bag, as I alluded to with Chris before, it came back, and that's a happy story. So, sometimes the world gives us back nice things, doesn't it?